So this is another list of major re-emerging infectious diseases. We have here the column of the diseases and the pathogen and the transmission of the root vector. Okay. At the top we have here malaria, for instance, transmitted through female Anopheles mosquitoes. Okay. So we will review one of these diseases in the list, for instance, dengue fever. Dengue is caused by any of 4 close related viruses. The infection with one serotype will not give you immunity to the others. And sequential infections will put people at greater risk for dengue hemorrhagic fever and dengue shock syndrome. Dengue is transmitted between people by mosquitoes, Aedes aegypti and Aedes albopictus, which are found throughout the world. And in many parts of the tropics and subtropics, dengue is endemic. So the 4 dengue viruses originated in monkeys and then independently jumped to humans in Africa or Southeast Asia. And this was maybe 100 or 800 years ago. And I want to mention these also, that disruption of World War II, in particular, the coincidental transport of the mosquito around the world in cargoes, are thought to have played a crucial role in the dissemination of the viruses. Okay, and keep this in mind because at the end of the session we will review some of the factors that drive the emergence of diseases. So dengue fever was first documented only in the 1950s during epidemics in Philippines and Thailand. And it was not until 1981 that a large number of cases began to appear in the Caribbean and Latin America, where highly effective Aedes control programs had been in place until early 1970s. If we see a map of the world, we can see here that now dengue is endemic in at least 100 countries in Asia, the Pacific, the Americas, Africa, and the Caribbean. And WHO estimates that 50 to 100 million infections occur every year, including 500,000 of cases in children and around 22,000 deaths also in children. So another emerging disease that I think it would be appropriate to mention would be Ebola virus disease. Not many years ago, we read on the news this big outbreak of Ebola, right? What we need to know is that Ebola first appeared in outbreaks in Sudan and the Democratic Republic of Congo, or DRC. And this was in the 70s, in 1976. There are 5 species of Ebola virus that have been identified, and 4 of them are known to cause diseases in humans. The Ebola virus disease is severe, as probably you read on the news. It's really severe and often fatal. Okay? Outbreaks have a case fatality rate of up to 90%. 90% of people infected will die from Ebola. Humans contract Ebola through contact with bodily fluids of infected animals or infected people. The fruit bat, an animal, is considered to be the natural host of the Ebola virus. So it's when people get in contact with the host that they become infected. And unfortunately, there is no specific treatment or vaccine available for use in people or in animals. I'd like you to see this graph. We mentioned Ebola has been appearing since the 1970s. Okay, so since 1976 until the big outbreak that we saw on the news until 2012, actually there were only a little more than 2,000 cases of deaths. Okay, of total cases, and nearly 1,600 of deaths. And this is in a span of how many? 30-something years. Okay. And then what happened between 2014 and 2015? Suddenly we have this outbreak of Ebola. And quickly it spread to more than one country. And we have now more than 20,000 suspected, probable or confirmed cases of Ebola, and more than 10,000 deaths. Okay. Most of the cases occurring in Liberia and Sierra Leone, Guinea, and much less numbers in Nigeria. So this is taken from a paper published in PLOS Neglect Tropical Diseases, and this is to review the socio-economic and the environmental factors that may have influenced Ebola's emergence. Okay, here we have factors such as environmental features. Okay, why mainly these three countries were severely affected by the outbreak. There are also some human resources and infrastructure factors that will facilitate the spread of the disease. For instance, look at these numbers. Number of physicians per 1,000 people in 2012. In all these countries, there is really not enough number of physicians to attend, not only for Ebola cases, but in general to all other diseases. Improved sanitation, if we see how improved sanitation for these countries, only 19% for Guinea, 13% for Sierra Leone. And you can see also how dramatically different it is if we see the rural and the urban. Here in Sierra Leone, improved sanitation in rural areas is only 7%, whereas in urban settings is 23%. Also, improved water source for these countries, all of them less than 50%, they have improved water source, and as little as 25% for Guinea or Liberia. When we see now some population features that also play a role, we see how the urban population has increased, okay, in these places. More than 200% increase since the 1960 to the moment of the outbreak in 2012. So urban population has increased very quickly. Both three countries have civil unrest. Okay, so the context also plays a big role here. Literacy is low as 25% for 2010 in Guinea. And there were also some cultural and behavioral features that proved to be a facilitator of the spread of the disease. For instance, the bushmeat consumption. This is the very first fact that put people in risk. Do you know what bushmeat means? Anyone? Have you ever heard the word bushmeat? No? I guess? Okay, usually we get our proteins from meat, let's say cow, fish, poultry, right? But in some other places, some other settings, it's difficult to get the protein from these sources. So they get proteins from other types of animals, wildlife animals. And this is bushmeat. So they will go to the forest and they will catch or be in contact, they will hunt for wild animals, okay? And this is very extended in these places. Then also the use of traditional burial practices. In many countries, maybe your countries too, when someone passes away, when someone dies, we will usually maybe hire services of a company or a funeral services. But in these settings, it's traditional that when your relative dies, the members of the family will take care of the corpse. So they will wash the corpse. So if you can imagine, if this person has had a disease, the body fluids become in contact with healthy individuals. So now these healthy individuals will also get infected. Okay, and these are traditions very strongly, deeply rooted in these settings. This is a report from WHO. Maybe the borders are not that clear, but this is Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea. And you can see how the spread of this disease has really crossed national borders. Okay, the diseases, they don't really need passport to go to the next neighboring country. So they easily would spread along. Another more recent virus and outbreak that we have seen is the Zika virus, right? This was very recent on the news, and we now know the transmission, probably mosquito-borne through Aedes species. But then we also know that some transmission may be due to sexual transmission, okay? Sexual transmission, blood transfusion, mother to child maybe. About the symptoms, and this is the scary part, that they can be subclinical, meaning that they are not really prominent symptoms. It could look like a mild influenza. Some severe manifestations have been described, including Guillain-Barré syndrome in adults and possible microcephaly in newborns of infected mothers. To this day, there is no effective treatment for the Zika virus. So for prevention, there's no vaccine. And the public health response is primarily focused on preventing the infection, because there is still a lot that we don't know. Zika was declared public health emergency this year in February. But the virus has been already identified in 1947. It was 1948. The virus was recovered from a mosquito Aedes in Uganda. And the first cases were detected in Uganda and Tanzania, or United Republic of Tanzania, in the 50s. Then we'll have some human infectious maybe across Africa and Asia through the 60s and 80s. But we saw the large outbreak in the French Polynesia and Brazil between 2013 and 15. So this is taken from WHO, and you can see here, well, maybe not really, very clearly. This is a timeline of the cases. And now you can see how it has quickly spread to different parts of the world.